Hello and welcome back to Down to the Tyre. Today I am joined by a motorsport content creator who, as we established as we were just chatting before we started recording, has been traveling a lot lately and has been to a lot of very exciting events over in America, which we're going to delve all into in this episode. So I'm joined by Makenna, who you may recognize from TikTok, but I'm going to let her intro because I know you do a bit of Instagram, a bit of other platforms as well. So how are you today? And also, if you could just introduce yourself as well, that would be amazing.
Yeah, doing well. This is a great way to start my Monday, middle of the workday, my lunch break. So this is an awesome way to kickstart my Monday. But yeah, I'm Makenna. I also go by MakLovesMotorsport on some social media. But yeah, I'm just an American content creator that kind of fell into motorsport a little over a year ago and just kind of started posting about it and trying to find other people that shared a similar passion that I just kind of stumbled upon. And yeah, here I am. It's crazy.
That's something I was going to ask you about because I saw your TikTok quite recently where you said last year you watched the Indy 500 and you had no clue what was happening. And this year you were obviously there. And the amount that your knowledge, like I would have had no idea that you'd only been into the sport for a year, honestly. Like the amount of knowledge you have is so impressive, especially based on that. So I was just kind of wondering like how you kind of got into it in the first place, but also what would you say to Makenna from last year who was watching the Indy 500 like what on earth is going on? What kind of would you say to her now looking back? Now you can see the journey that you've gone on in such a short space of time.
Yeah, thank you. That's very kind of you. Yeah, it's weird to look back a year ago because I distinctly remember, I think it was the first like really IndyCar race that I had watched because I had watched a little bit of 100 Days to Indy, at least like a couple back-to-back episodes because I wasn't following the series prior to that. And I distinctly remember like making my coffee around like 9 a.m. in the morning because that's kind of when the race starts because I'm on the West Coast. So it's 3 hours behind when they usually start around 12:45. So I just kind of remember turning it on and I'm like, wow, they're going pretty fast. Don't really recognize a ton of names. I see McLaren, Papaya. There's some familiarity there, but yeah, it's kind of crazy in hindsight, 365 days ago to know what I know and to have already experienced what I've experienced. And a lot of just what I fell into was obviously learning about F1 through Drive to Survive and then really just deep diving and listening to podcasts and finding other creators like yourself, especially for the Formula Series. Literally had no idea about the Formula Series, so you were super educational and helpful in that regard, and just learning about this motorsport world that I had no idea what was about. And I remember people talking a little bit about IndyCar or something. And I was like, wow, the cars look kind of similar. It's open wheel racing, and learning more about it. And I'm like, holy cow, they literally come to Oregon and wait, they only race in the US and one in Canada. So like, okay, this is kind of similar, but this is different. And so I just kind of took it upon myself to learn and find podcasts and articles and listen to interviews. And that's just kind of what I love about motorsport in general is the ability to learn. And there's so much. And I grew up watching all of these sports, but I never grew up watching any sort of racing, didn't know anyone that raced, karting, nothing like that. So it was kind of this whole new world of knowledge and education for me to learn. And I still learn literally every day.
See, that's funny that you say that about my content because you're kind of the flip side for me with IndyCar because obviously, as you can tell from the accent, I'm from the UK and we don't have IndyCar here. So I feel like I very much got into F1 and things that race in the UK first. And then I was like, oh my goodness, there's like an American F1, which obviously that's like now it's so much more than that. But that was literally my initial thought when I saw IndyCar, because as you said, the cars are very similar looking. And I was like, this is amazing. This is just another motorsport series for me to get invested in. So yeah, it's kind of yeah, your content was kind of similar to me in on the flip side with learning about IndyCar.
Yeah, I love that.
And also we mentioned before we started recording this, and again, this is another series that I do not know the most about, but I have watched the Netflix series for NASCAR. And
Mhm.
you were at NASCAR very recently in Portland, and you were flagging the event, and it was your first time flagging a pro event, I think I've seen. How was that whole experience?
Yeah, it was awesome. So yeah, it was the Xfinity series. So it was technically part of NASCAR, and then ARCA Menards West Series was there as well. So it's kind of like their version esque of, like F2 and F3 kind of their version of the feeder series. But it works a little differently because like Marco Andretti was driving, in ARCA Menard. So it's kind of confusing. But anyways, yeah, I kind of got after about a year or at least last year of learning about motorsports, I kind of wanted to be obviously more involved as if I don't, learn enough. So I just think it's so unique that I literally have a racetrack literally 30 minutes from me, and that's Portland International Raceway. And so even just this summer, the fact that NASCAR comes, Formula E comes, and IndyCar comes, it's like, holy cow, this is a great place to be. And so, kind of early spring, I got involved with PIR, Portland International Raceway, and kind of just wanted to learn more about the track and ways to get involved. And the thing that I was most mesmerized by was flagging and comms. So either flagging or being on the radio and talking to race control and learning how that works and the purpose of these flaggers and what they're looking for and what their flags mean, and then how to communicate properly on the radio to race control and marking incidents and all of these things. It's really cool to see what kind of goes behind the scenes when you just show up to a race. And so I've volunteered quite a bit every other weekend ish at PIR for a lot of like local and regional events. But this was the first time I signed up for an actual pro event. So like it was confusing because the flags mean different things and they don't want you to flag as much. And there's all of these rules, but it was really cool because I was able to work right on the chicane. So kind of that first couple turns. And yeah, it was very hectic. We waved a lot of flags. Let's just say that.
I can imagine. And obviously, I know the experience when you are volunteering or working an event is quite different to attending as a fan. But how would you say, in terms of the NASCAR paddock or the NASCAR experience, how would you say that differs to maybe an IndyCar experience, attending an IndyCar race or attending an F1 race if you've attended one?
Yeah, so I can't attest to F1 because I still haven't been to an F1 race, which is kind of crazy. But comparing it to IndyCar, the weekends are structured very differently. Where IndyCar is there, they kind of start setting up Wednesday or Thursday, and Friday's media day, practice, Saturday practice, qualifying, and then Sunday morning practice, and then race. Where these NASCAR slash Xfinity series slash ARCA or the truck series, we had Pro Threes race, which wasn't a part about NASCAR, but they're like just old spec BMWs that race that locally. So they raced like on Friday, but ARCA came in like practice race, qualified, and left, and that was it for them. And then it was Xfinity, pretty much all Saturday, and that was it. So they come in for pretty much one day, practice, qualify, race, and they're out. So the weekends are structured a little bit differently compared to F1 and IndyCar. But from an accessibility standpoint, still very similar, just walking amongst the paddock. And obviously I could go everywhere because I'm looking like a marshmallow, Marshall with all my white. But it's very similar with the open paddock style. There's not fences. I almost thought that the Xfinity series was more accessible because there wasn't even, fences to block off like part of the pit lane versus even just the garages. So just people everywhere chatting. It was kind of cool to see some different teams that I'm not necessarily as familiar with because there's not a ton of crossover from either F1 or IndyCar. But yeah, I can't recommend going to a lot of, especially these feeder series, because the access and the cost is well worth attendance compared to some of the larger F1 races for sure.
Honestly, that's one of the biggest things about Down to the Tire. I'm always like, just go to your local track, even if it's not F1, even if it's not a pro event, just go, whether you're volunteering or whether you're attending as a fan. There's just so much that we know F1's not the most accessible in the world in terms of the ticket prices.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just so much that you can go to that is a lot more affordable and accessible, both in terms of the cost of the ticket, but also just in terms of the culture of the paddock and the places you can go and the people you can meet in the paddock. Because obviously we know F1 is quite elite in terms of who can get in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I know that you balance your everything you do motorsport wise, the content creation, the volunteering, you balance all of that with working full time as well. And I also work full time, and it can get quite intense. So I was really curious about how you kind of balance everything and how you kind of manage your time to make everything come together like it does.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to work for a great company, but also in a sales role. So I don't necessarily kind of have to like clock in, clock out. So there's times where I'm up earlier starting work, or if I have to go to an event or to go do something later in the afternoon, I kind of have that flexibility as obviously as long as I'm getting my work done. So it's nice to have that flexibility, like, I'm working from home today. I get to be on this podcast. It's awesome. So it is hard though, but it's something that I get excited to do after work, and having this kind of passion and almost, borderline obsession about learning and wanting to do more and educate myself and educate others and bring more people into the sport. And that's what really drives me. And so it's kind of balancing, especially on the weekends, whether I'm traveling to races, coinciding my busy schedule with my husband's and what he's doing because he also coaches football. So like that's kind of his passion, where motorsport is mine. And so we're kind of at this age where we can be selfish with our time and be able to do the things that we really, really love. Our only dependents are our dog, which obviously we love and want to make sure she's nurtured. But we're kind of at this age, right, where we can work hard for our money and be able to spend it and use our time wisely, which is great because we're not going to have that time, eventually in a couple years when it changes. But also we're at the age where people are getting married and having bridal showers and baby showers and all of these things. So then trying to balance all of that can definitely be hard. But I think it's, knowing that your job is to do your job and that can pay the bills. And as long as you enjoy what you're doing, but also, being able to have that passion after work is really special, something to look forward to.
That's exactly how I feel as well. It's almost nice to know, like, right, I've got this job, I've got an income coming in, I'm fine. And then it
Mhm.
just means that you can really just invest your time outside of that in the things that make you happy, even if they aren't like making you money, like volunteering and things like that.
Mhm.
Like, obviously, that's not a sustainable option without having a job as well. But
Correct.
but it just makes it so much easier to actually pursue those passions alongside it, I think. And in terms of, obviously, you've got all of the stuff you've got going on with your content creation and the volunteering and everything. Do you kind of ever see that as a career path you could go down, or you always kind of see it being something that you do alongside having a job alongside it?
I think possibly I kind of just want to see where this year takes me. And I think I when I started my account, it was never to grow and be a content creator per se, or especially like a motorsport, content creator. That was never like, oh, I want to have thousands of followers and be able to attend these races and post about it. It was kind of just, I felt like I was almost living a double life because I don't really have many friends that are interested in it. I have one or two girls that I used to play softball with that, love F1, but other than that, I don't like none of my close friends watch it. My husband's like not that interested. He supports me, but there's just no one in my life that has the same fire and drive for motorsports as myself. And so trying to find people that also share that was a big part of why I kind of started doing what I was doing. And so it's awesome to see this community that I've been a part of and people that I literally fly across the country to go see at races. And it's, that once were strangers that are now, people that share this, obsession, this fire for, seeing cars go fast at different circuits. So I think it definitely could be something possibly. I don't know if I would ever pursue it full time. I think I enjoy the idea of either having some work that is tied to motorsports, but I also feel like there is a hard fine line of doing what you are passionate about for work and making it work because sometimes when you love something and then you make it your work, then it feels like a chore, not necessarily something that you want to do for fun. And so I think that's kind of a fine line to walk as well. And I feel like a lot of content creators do get burnt out, whether that's motorsports or any other kind of content that they're creating. So I'm kind of just open to exploring and seeing the people that I meet and getting to learn about the experiences that I have for this next kind of year or so, and then obviously help other people that are interested or want to learn more, but just kind of see where it takes me.
That's such a nice place to be in, because it's like you're
Mhm.
happy, just seeing where it kind of takes you. I think there's a real beauty in that, just like, you know, letting the path unfold.
Yeah, I mean, if you would have told me in January that I was going to be at the Indy 500, I would be like, yeah, I don't know how that's going to happen, but it does. It just, yeah, it's crazy.
And it happened, and that literally takes me perfectly onto the next section I want to talk about, which is the Indy 500, because
Mhm.
you were there. I need a debrief because obviously I watch it from other side of the globe on my little Sky Sports screen, but attending it, I imagine, is a whole other experience. And yeah, I need a debrief from the perspective of someone who was there.
Yeah, I can't recommend it enough. I think it needs to be on everyone's bucket list. It's truly hard to describe, and I kind of knew that going in. Everyone said, the expectations you have for it, that's great. They're going to be blown away, even if you set them, 100 times higher than you think it's going to be. And it is. It, it's so crazy to say, but like you literally get chills when you walk through to the speedway because it's this massive oval. There's all of these stands. It's the single largest single day sporting event in the world. All these people come together for 3 hours of racing. It's tradition. It's happened for over a century, and seeing these cars go that fast. Like I said, I've been to a couple street races and in Portland, which is a road course, and it's cool. But to see these guys and Catherine just, I mean, take these corners at incredible speeds and seeing the car get loose and it's just, yeah, I'm a loss for words. And so I think it's very special for people to attend for the first time, and now I know what to expect, which is great. But there's a bit of patriotism too for us having it on Memorial Day, in the US. And so I think everyone needs to attend it. And it's funny because Monaco was definitely always at the top of my list from an F1 perspective. Obviously, I know the racing isn't great, but just kind of, the history and what went into it. And I'm a big Ferrari fan, love Charles Leclerc. I'm like, this would be a great race to have as a bucket list item. But now I just think, I'm like, well, the Indy 500 is on the same day. And like, I'm not going to miss Indy 500 ever again in my life. So yeah, I came back and I told, my husband, I was like, well, I don't know if you're going to need me on Memorial Day for the next, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years, but I will be in Speedway, Indiana. So if you need anything, that's where I'll be.
So fair enough. And yeah, it's so frustrating that Monaco's the same weekend because I feel like I get why, but also, God, they're two events that you really do want to be able to attend both. It's so annoying. But yeah, obviously Indy 500, as you've said, it is. I feel like, especially being someone from the UK, I feel like a lot of people throw around the pinnacle of motorsport phrase about F1. Now, there's also Indy 500, which is often called the greatest spectacle in racing. I'm really intrigued to hear your thoughts on this because I know which side I'm on, and I do not think F1 is the pinnacle of motorsport. I'll say that much. But I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts as someone who's attended it as well, how you kind of view, the different kind of labels that are thrown around for different motorsport championships and motorsport races.
Yeah, and I think even F1 and NASCAR have tried to use the greatest spectacle in racing for certain events, and it's been completely shut down because that is that's owned by the 500 and IndyCar in general. And so I don't necessarily disagree that F1 may be like the pinnacle of motorsports because of the level of engineering and everything that goes into it, with it not being a spec series, comparing it to IndyCar, where everyone gets a Dallara chassis, and you have the engines, Honda and Chevrolet. So then there's only a couple things that these teams can adjust that makes them so good. But I it, the 500 is the best race in the whole entire world, and I will fight anyone to the death. I mean, it was very interesting seeing people compare even like NASCAR and the Coke 600, which was Kyle Larson was obviously trying to do the double, and there were a lot of NASCAR people with their opinions of Larson missing the 600 or being late with the delay. And I wish people would understand that, one, we're not trying to compete against all these other motorsport series. Like, it's okay to watch both and love both, but I wish more people really understood. It's like, this is the biggest single day sporting event, is the biggest race in the whole entire world. Like, even Le Mans is great, like all of these endurance races, there's so many phenomenal racing series out there, or even races, but nothing tops the 500. And so I will go to the death saying the 500 is the greatest spectacle in racing. It's probably going to be the best race that we see in the whole entire year, but it also depends on what type of racing you like to see. And you may not think it's that great because you're not invested in the teams and the drivers and the way the series works, or maybe you're not really bought into ovals yet. And I was not familiar with ovals, obviously coming from F1. And so learning more about the ovals and what goes into it and how the cars are changing, and it's just all of the aerodynamics that are different and the different tire sizes and all of these things that go into it. Now that I've learned about it, then I'm more invested into it. And so I think it's the kind of the people that are like, if I don't know about it, I'm not interested, which, granted, like, I was not interested in any motorsports because I didn't care to know anything about it until, fell down the rabbit hole and haven't climbed back out. So I think everyone's going to have their opinions, but I wish everyone was a little bit more open-minded and willing to learn a little bit, because, we're not here just to bash other racing series, but I think there's just something special about the 500.
I completely agree with the thing you said about the engineering in F1. I'd say F1 is, because of how many different elements go into the engineering side, pinnacle of engineering, perhaps pinnacle of racing. Now I think that's a different label. And
Yes.
the reason I kind of oppose that label is just because I think, as you said, there's just so much out there that it's like you don't need to just watch one. No one. I get that you know. I do watch a crazy amount of different motorsport series, and some people are like, "How do you have the time for all of those?" I struggle, but at the same time, I do just feel like there's nothing stopping you from watching as many as you want to watch, and I think different series have different things that make them stand out. 500 is undeniably, like, if you look at F1, the biggest event of the F1 calendar is Monaco, I would say, in terms of the event itself as a whole. But that's not the 500. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Mm-mm.
it just doesn't compare. So I feel like, yeah, I just I don't think there needs to be a pinnacle necessarily. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
just everything. Everything is great. Watch what you want, but I will say, if you want entertaining racing, F1 is not the pinnacle.
Yes, and it it kinda used to be, and, like, obviously, there are some great races, there's some great passing, but it's like, if you mix it with, the Red Bull dominance we've seen, on top of how big the cars are, how limited the types of strategies that these drivers and teams can employ, it really limits the actual craziness of the race. That's why we want rain. That's why we want all of these miscellaneous stuff. That's why we want, Max hitting a pylon or whatever the heck he hit. It's like all these things. That's what we're like praying for because we need a spice up, something different because, Max leading the whole entire race is not very interesting. And I've heard the Dutch national anthem a million times. And if you told me 2 years ago that I would know the Dutch anthem by heart, I would be very curious on where I would be in today's society. But the stuff that these F1 fans are craving, they can find in other series. And if they don't want to watch it, that's totally fine. But just don't bash about these other series or people that are talking about it. But the best series for actual racing right now, I do not believe is an F1. Is it possible it could be eventually? Yes. But like IMSA is phenomenal. The 24 hours of Daytona. I mean, like some of these races, Sebring literally came down to the final minutes and they're racing for hours. And so the fact that these races can come down to such slim margins and they're running these endurance races, yet F1, we already know who the winner is going to be as long as he's on pole. It's it's just not as exciting. And so I just hope that people, if they do want good racing, go out and search for it. And I know sometimes it could be hard if you're not familiar with sports car racing or IndyCar or NASCAR, or all of these different series that are racing in different times of the world, or you might not be able to go to one. It's just kind of where you put your time, right? And if you don't want to do it, that's totally fine. But don't just go around saying F1's the best racing series because that's all you watch. That's when you're going to get in trouble.
Exactly. And you speak about, obviously, some of the races you mentioned are a bit longer than the Indy 500, but I do want to speak about how close the last lap was in the Indy 500. And that was stressful. It was also like 1 a.m. for me at that point. So I was like half asleep. And then I was like, oh my gosh, it's the last lap. And boy, did that wake me up. So
Yeah.
I need to know what was your experience of witnessing that live in front of your eyes?
Oh, that was crazy. Yeah, I was kind of in the media center area, and we're kind of on the balcony watching where the start finish line is, and there's a big screen, so we could see that Pato had just overtaken Joseph, on that final lap. And so obviously the crowd went wild. Pato has fans all across the world, and I'm not like the biggest Joseph slash Team Penske fan, so I was like, he won last year, like, no, we're not doing a back-to-back situation here. And so Pato's been so close so many times. And so, when he overtook Joseph, you could already tell that his approach was different from 2022. If anyone watched, Ericsson won and Pato kind of lifted on that first turn and just was never able to get Ericsson and kind of gave it up. And so it was cool to see. He's like, that's not happening again this year. And so he changed his approach. But Joseph was overtaking a lot of people on the third turn, and especially going to the outside. And so he just did that so perfectly and kind of cut Pato, and he got some dirty air, and that's kind of how Pato like slid up the wall a little bit and was not able to catch Joseph going into four and obviously on the final straight. So everyone roared when Pato passed, and then it was like a completely different roar when Joseph passed. And I just think it's cool that these guys literally drive 500 laps, and like I said, it literally came down to the last 40 seconds of this race. And I think that's just what makes it so special. And it's cool that there were so many people there in attendance that one had come to 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, up to 60 straight races, 500s year after year after year, because it's just a tradition thing. And so for a lot of people to say, hey, I think this is one of the best races we've had in, kind of almost the past decade, 5 to 10 years. And that was just cool to experience real time.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask as well because you mentioned that you're not the biggest Penske fan. I was going to ask, who do you support? Like, who are you rooting for?
It's funny because it kind of with F1, like I always have like my diehards, like I'm gonna cheer for Leclerc, Loveland. Like there's a couple teams that I always support or people that I want to do well. Where IndyCar, I swear, like it kind of fluctuates. There were certain drivers that I liked when I started the series, certain teams that I was like, okay, I'll cheer for you, not for you. And I like Chip Ganassi. He's been in the sport for a really long time, so like their rookies, which is Kiffin Simpson and Linus Lundqvist. Enjoyed cheering for those rookies, and they've been doing really well this year. I like Pietro Fittipaldi. Obviously, he's very unique to have raced in just about every single racing series. And yeah, and he's faced a lot of adversity, him and his brother. And so I think I just, love supporting him and seeing him, do well and hopefully stay in IndyCar and have this opportunity. So there's kind of a handful that I cheer for. I love Pato, I love Rossi. So Aaron McLaren and that kind of crossover with McLaren F1. But I feel like the more I just learn about the teams and the drivers, and it kind of just fluctuates. And I think a lot of it also depends for new fans, just like it did in F1, their media presence and what their personalities and learning, how they answer specific questions and, are they not as media trained or whatever it is. I just think it's fun to cheer for a lot of different teams because as an F1, we have the constructors, and I feel like usually people are pretty, not obsessed, but they have their kind of favorite teams and maybe a couple different drivers, where in IndyCar, like there's no constructors, there's no team championship, it's the engine manufacturers, and then it's the team, and there's the leader circle. But it's you can like 4 different drivers or 4 different teams, it doesn't matter, you can cheer for all of them. So yeah, I feel like it just kind of depends on the weekend where they're racing. But yeah, I kind of have a handful of maybe like 5 that I would say I cheer for the most.
I'm quite biased towards Marcus Armstrong because I started watching IndyCar before he joined last season. I watched the 500 for a couple of years before that, but I never watched the full season. And Marcus, I supported him through like F3 and F2. So when I found out he was going to Indy, I was like, wow, now I'm going to watch the whole, and especially because he wasn't even doing the 500 his first year.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, I've got to watch the road and street courses now because I want to see him. And obviously he got his first podium yesterday, which was lovely.
He did very well, and it's cool to see. I mean, like the fact that he won best rookie last year and he didn't even run goals. So it's like he didn't even run, 6 races and still won, which goes to test. It's like, hey, he is pretty good. And it's cool to see a lot of these F2 guys come across. Like we had Lundgaard and a couple of other guys that have come through the Formula Series that are like, hey, I'm gonna take the road to Indy, or they just go directly to IndyCar. And I think it's really cool to see them do well because there's just not a ton of opportunity, obviously, in F1. And now, there's a lot up in the air right now for what the 2025 season is going to look like. But, we have a ton of phenomenal F2 champions or, top finishers that don't have seats. And it was cool to see Teo, hop on over, and he's been doing really, really well. So I think it's great for the F2 name in the sense it's like, hey, they are producing phenomenal drivers and they're not getting that opportunity in F1. So let's let them showcase it in IndyCar. And I love it, especially with Prema coming in. Like, I'm like, great, now I have another team to support. Like, oh my gosh, this is getting excessive. But, I hope it draws a lot of those Formula Series fans and even, Prema fans across the pond to the US and IndyCar just to see how great the racing is. And it's like, Armstrong did great. And I think he's going to do a really good job over these next couple of years. He's kind of starting to figure it out. And it takes a little bit. I mean, these cars are similar, but they're different. They don't have power steering and, just the different strategies and the tires and the different tracks that they're not used to racing. It's going to take them a little bit to get used to it. But when they do, obviously it makes for a really good race when you literally don't know who's going to stand on the podium.
I saw in one of your TikToks that you were making bets at the Indy 500 and you were very successful. So for the remaining 7 minutes, we're on a timer on my non-premium Zoom account. I want to test this, and I really, really want you to make at least one. You can make as many as you want, but a prediction. It can be anything. It can be who you think is going to drive for Prema in IndyCar. It can be as simple as who you think is going to win the next race. It can be anything, but I really want to see if any of these predictions come true.
I think I had a lot more luck than actual talent when I was guessing about the 500, and probably just a little bit more of, delusion that Charles was going to win, but that did work. So I was glad that I was able to put that out there. Not saying you should thank me for the win, but
Yeah, yeah.
gosh, I don't know. I mean, I think it's cool that Dixon is leading, and Dixon is just, there's no words to describe what he's been able to do for, 2 decades in IndyCar. I don't know. I think I want to be surprised if in IndyCar we do get 1 or 2 first-time winners or first-time podiums. I think Palou is still going to dominate. I think Joseph is still going to do really well on some ovals. Penske just was able to have a phenomenal package for Speedway in the 500, and a little in part to the AJ Foyt relationship and Mike Cannon, the engineer. Gosh, I wish I can. I mean, I would love to see more rookies doing well. I don't know. I think I would love to see Kiffin Simpson in the top 10 regularly. I think he's a really great driver, and a lot of people had a little hesitation with his move up from Indy next to adding a 5th car for Chip Ganassi. But you know, these guys are just so good. It's just hard to describe the things that they have to go through, and just the amount of skill. And even tying back to like me flagging, I think about when they pick me up and they make eye contact, if we're like throwing flags, like that's like, meters and meters and meters and meters and meters away before they're even attacking a corner. So it's like to think about all the things that these drivers are doing while they're driving at hundreds of miles an hour. It's kind of crazy. And I just think that's what makes IndyCar specifically so special, is anyone can win. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we have a larger amount of winners. Like I think Joseph won 5 out of 6 ovals last year. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Pato winning a handful. I really, really, really hope that the championship does not get decided prior to Nashville, because it did last year with Palou winning. He actually won it in Portland, so it's kind of cool to see him like celebrate the championship. But that was the first time since 07 that IndyCar had decided the championship before the last race. So like if that doesn't get you excited to watch IndyCar, the fact that this championship dogfight literally is to the end, not Max, like winning halfway through the season. This is not turning into predictions whatsoever, but I would like to see, gosh, I don't know. Road America. Let's see here. That's the next race. Road course. I think Will Power could do really well. I could see Scott McLaughlin also doing really well at this road course. I would love to see Rossi do really well. I think my Prema predictions, I think it would be cool to see Ilott have a full-time seat next year. I know, fingers crossed, he did so well. There's kind of like rumors that maybe that they want, a veteran and they want a rookie. I think it'd be cool to maybe have Rossi there. There's maybe ties there. People saying Logan's going to lose his seat. Hey, he's a Prema driver. Come on over to IndyCar. I think that would be great for IndyCar in general, just to get more Logan fans. But I personally don't see Logan doing open wheel anymore. I kind of see him doing more of like an endurance IMSA situation, but that might just be my opinion. So I don't know. I think there's a lot in the air, and there's a lot that's kind of going around behind the scenes that we don't see. But I think if anything, Ilott needs to have a full-time seat for sure, whether that's with Prema or a different team, but fingers crossed.
Anywhere. I'll take anywhere at this point.
Yeah.
Let's hope. I hope we manifested that as hard as you manifested the Charles Leclerc Monaco.
Exactly. I'll just start thinking about it every day. I mean,
what more can we do?
Exactly. And it's not like, we're asking for someone that doesn't drive very well to have a full-time seat. I mean, he's definitely proved himself, and it's not hard. It's hard going back and forth, from the UK to the US, and only doing certain, races, not knowing when the next one. Okay, now we're doing endurance, and it's not easy. And I think a lot of people don't realize even just the time change. I mean, that's hard for these guys are elite athletes to be able to do that, and make sure that their nutrition's on point, and know these different racetracks. I mean, just think about how much they have to study and know when to shift gears and all of this stuff. So yeah, I think Ilott definitely deserves a seat, and I don't know who I got to talk to make that happen, but I'm sure both of us are willing to put in a good word for him.
Hopefully the right people are listening.
Exactly.
Well,
exactly.
Thank you so much for coming on Down to the Tyre today. Before we go, can you just plug all of your socials, where people can find you and everything, please?
Yeah, I think for the most part, just on Instagram and TikTok, it's just MakLovesMotorsport.
Amazing. They will be linked below, so you can go click them and find Makenna straight away. thank you for being on Down to the Tyre. You have been an incredible guest. I really, really appreciate it in your lunch break as well. So thank you so much. For everyone listening, make sure to go and follow her on Instagram and TikTok. And make sure to follow Down to the Tyre as well. It's just at Down to the Tyre on all social media. Again, mainly Instagram and TikTok. They're kind of the main two, I feel like, at this point. X kind of fell off. And then you'll be able to keep up to date with all future episodes. But that's everything for now. Bye for now.